Step into the shadowy heart of Ashby Hollow, where a blacksmith lies dead in his locked forge, a shattered hammer at his side. Was it an accident or a chilling murder? Hercule Poirot, with his razor-sharp mind, unravels a web of secrets. A vengeful rival, a furious widow, a terrified apprentice, and a mysterious traitor named Silas Holt. Poisoned ale, a cryptic note, and a cunning plot converge in this gripping Agatha Christie-style mystery. As the truth emerges from the silent forge, one question burns: who wielded the fatal blow? Dive into the silent forge, where every clue sparks a revelation. Chapter 1. The Locked Door. The autumn wind carried a sharp chill as the carriage jolted along the uneven road to Ashby Hollow, a village tucked into the Cotswolds' gentle hills like a secret whispered by the earth. Hercule Poirot, immaculate in his polished shoes and neatly pressed overcoat, sat with his gloved hands folded, his green eyes flickering with quiet anticipation. Opposite him, Captain Hastings, ever the picture of earnest curiosity, clutched a crumpled copy of the Ashby Gazette, his face alight with the thrill of a new mystery. "Poirot, you must hear this," Hastings said, his voice rising above the creak of the carriage wheels. "It's the queerest thing. A blacksmith named Thomas Reddick, found dead in his own forge, the door bolted from within. They say his hammer was smashed to bits beside him, the coroner's calling it an accident, but the villagers, well, they're muttering about foul play." Poirot's mustache gave the faintest twitch, a sign of his mind stirring like a clockwork mechanism. "An accident, you say, with a door locked and a hammer broken? Mon cher Hastings, the world does not arrange itself so carelessly. A hammer does not shatter without purpose, and a locked door whispers of secrets. Tell me, what do you know of this Ashby Hollow?" Hastings, eager to please, rifled through his memory. "Small place, very old-fashioned. Stone cottages, a church, a brook running through. The forge is the heart of it, they say. Reddick was well known, a master craftsman, but he had enemies, or so the paper hints." "Enemies," Poirot mused, his gaze drifting to the mist curling over the hills. "The heart of a village is often its pulse of conflict. We shall see." The carriage slowed as Ashby Hollow came into view, its slate roofs gleaming under a weak sun. The forge stood apart, a squat, blackened building at the edge of the village square, its chimney silent, its windows dark. A crowd of villagers lingered nearby, their whispers falling silent as Poirot descended, his cane tapping the cobblestones with precise rhythm. Constable Barrow, a stout man with a face reddened by years of wind and duty, hurried forward, tipping his cap. "Mr. Poirot, sir, it's a privilege," Barrow said, his voice thick with relief. "We're proper stumped. Thomas Reddick, dead as a doornail, and no one can figure how or why. The forge was locked tight, barred door, shuttered windows, no way in or out." "Impossible, you say?" Poirot's eyes sparkled with the challenge. "There is no such thing, Constable. The impossible is merely the possible in disguise. Show me this forge." The interior was dim, heavy with the scent of charcoal and iron. The fire in the hearth had long gone cold, leaving a chill that seemed to cling to the stone walls. Thomas Reddick lay sprawled near the anvil, his broad frame still, his weathered hands clutching a splintered fragment of a hammer's handle. His face, frozen in a grimace, bore the marks of a hard life. Deep lines, a scar across one brow. The hammer's head lay in pieces around him, glinting dully in the light from a single lantern. Poirot knelt, his movements deliberate, his gloved fingers hovering over the body without touching. curieux," he murmured, his eyes tracing the scene. The anvil, massive and unyielding, showed no signs of damage. The floor, dusted with ash, bore only Reddick's heavy boot prints. The door's iron bolt, simple but sturdy, was firmly in place, its surface unmarred by scratches or force. "This hammer," Poirot said, pointing to the fragments, "it is not broken by accident. To shatter such a tool requires force, deliberate, precise. And yet the man is dead, and the room is sealed. Hastings, what do your English instincts tell you?" Hastings rubbed his chin. "Well, it's dashed odd. If it's murder, how'd the killer get out? And why smash the hammer? It doesn't make sense." "Sense," Poirot replied, rising, "is what we shall impose upon this chaos. The little gray cells, they are already at work." He turned to Constable Barrow. "Who found the body?" "Jacob Wren, the apprentice," Barrow said. "Came in at dawn, found the door barred, had to break a window to get in. Near fainted when he saw Reddick." "And this Jacob, he is trustworthy?" Poirot asked. Barrow hesitated. "He's a good lad, but nervy. Always scribbling in notebooks, not like most blacksmith's boys." Poirot nodded, his gaze lingering on the chalky residue at the corner of Reddick's mouth, barely visible against his weathered skin. "We must speak with this Jacob, and with others who knew Monsieur Reddick. But first, Constable, summon the doctor. There is more here than meets the eye." As Barrow hurried off, Poirot paced the forge, his steps measured, his mind a whirl of connections. "A locked door, a broken hammer, a dead man," he said softly. "The stage is set, Hastings. The curtain rises on a most intriguing drama." Chapter 2. The suspects emerge. The rusty anvil, the sole inn of Ashby Hollow, stood at the heart of the village square, its timbered facade sagging under the weight of centuries. Its sign, a faded depiction of an anvil wreathed in ivy, creaked in the autumn breeze as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings stepped inside. The air was thick with the scent of aloe and wood smoke, and the low murmur of villagers' voices hushed as the two strangers entered. The inn's parlor, with its uneven oak beams and flickering hearth, offered a stage for Poirot's first act in unraveling the mystery of Thomas Reddick's death. Poirot, his mustache immaculate despite the dusty journey, surveyed the room with the precision of a watchmaker. His green eyes, sharp and unyielding, took in every detail. The worn tables, the tankards clutched by weathered hands, the curious glances darting his way. Hastings, ever the contrast, stood tall and eager, his boyish enthusiasm barely contained as he whispered, "This place feels like it's holding its breath, Poirot. They know something, don't they?" "Oui, mon ami," Poirot replied softly, adjusting his gloves. "A village is like a tapestry. Every thread knows its neighbor's secrets. We shall tug at these threads and see what unravels." Constable Barrow, his face still flushed from the chill outside, ushered them to a corner table where 3 figures awaited. "These are the ones you'll want to speak to, Mr. Poirot," he said, his voice low. "They've all got ties to Reddick, and none too friendly, if you ask me." Poirot inclined his head, his expression one of polite curiosity, though his mind was already cataloging possibilities. "Introduce them, if you please, Constable." Barrow cleared his throat, gesturing to the first figure, a man whose broad shoulders and soot-stained hands marked him as a craftsman. "This is Elias Varn, blacksmith from Wickham, 3 miles yonder. He and Reddick had bad blood going back years, something about a commission Varn claims Reddick stole." Elias Varn rose, towering over the table, his eyes dark and smoldering like the coals of his trade. His beard, flecked with gray, framed a face hardened by years at the forge. "I'll not deny I hated Reddick," he growled, his voice rough as gravel. "He undercut me on a job for Lord Harwood's estate, promised a gate I'd bid for, then delivered shoddy work and pocketed the coin. But murder? I'd not stoop so low. I was in Wickham all night, drinking at the Red Lion. Ask Hodges, the tavern keeper." Poirot's gaze lingered on Varne's hands, noting the faint tremor in his fingers. "A feud over business is a powerful motive, Monsieur Varne, and yet you claim innocence. We shall verify this alibi, n'est-ce pas?" Varne snorted, folding his arms. "Verify all you like. I've nothing to hide." Barrow gestured to the next figure, a woman seated with the poise of one accustomed to command. Mrs. Margaret Cole, widow of the late Mr. Cole, who owned half the land round here. She'd ordered a custom gate from Reddick for her estate, but it was never finished. She was seen at the forge the night he died. Margaret Cole, her silver hair pinned beneath a velvet hat, fixed Poirot with a gaze as sharp as cut glass. Her dress, though simple, was of fine quality, and her hands, adorned with a single sapphire ring, rested calmly in her lap. "Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice cool and measured, "I am a woman of means, not a murderess. Thomas Reddick was to craft an iron gate for my late husband's memorial. He promised delivery by Michaelmas, but when I visited him at 7 that evening, he was drunk, muttering nonsense about debts and delays. I left him alive, and I have no reason to wish him dead." Poirot noted the steadiness of her voice, the absence of hesitation. "You say he was drunk, madame. Did he speak of anyone else? A rival, perhaps, or his apprentice?" She shook her head, her lips thinning. "He was incoherent. I saw no one else, and the forge was quiet as a tomb." "Quiet," Poirot repeated, his tone thoughtful. And yet, death was not far behind. The final figure, barely more than a boy, shifted uneasily in his seat. "Jacob Wren," Barrow said, "Reddick's apprentice. Been with him 2 years. He's the one who found the body, broke a window to get in when he couldn't open the door." Jacob Wren was a lanky youth of 19, his face pale and freckled, his brown eyes darting like a cornered animal's. His hands, stained with ink rather than soot, twisted a frayed cap as he spoke. I didn't do nothing, sir," he stammered. "Master Reddick sent me home early, around 6, said he had business to tend to. I was in my room all night, above the forge. Next morning, I found him. Like that." Poirot leaned forward, his voice gentle but probing. "And you saw nothing unusual, Monsieur Wren? No visitors, no sounds from the forge?" Jacob's gaze dropped to the table. "No, sir. It was quiet. I swear it." Poirot sat back, his fingers steepled, his mind a whirl of impressions. Varne's simmering anger, Margaret Cole's icy composure, Jacob's nervous evasion, each was a piece of the puzzle, but the picture remained obscured. "Merci," he said at last. "You have all been most illuminating. We shall speak again." As the suspects dispersed, Hastings leaned in, his voice low. "What do you make of them, Poirot? Varne's got a temper, Mrs. Cole's got a motive, and that boy, well, he's jumpy as a cat." Poirot's lips curved faintly. "They are all threads, Hastings, but none yet weave the truth. Varne's anger is loud, but is it deep? Mrs. Cole's calm is a mask, but what does it hide? And young Jacob, his fear is palpable, but fear of what? We must observe, question, and think." The inn's patrons resumed their chatter, casting sidelong glances at the diminutive detective. Poirot, undeterred, requested a private room for further discussion. The innkeeper, a wiry man named Mr. Tully, led them to a small parlor upstairs, its walls adorned with faded tapestries. A fire crackled in the grate, casting shadows that danced like specters of the village's secrets. Poirot settled into a chair, his posture impeccable, and beckoned Constable Barrow to join them. "Tell me, Constable, of Thomas Reddick, what manner of man was he?" Barrow rubbed his chin, his brow furrowing. "Reddick was a hard man, sir, but respected. Best blacksmith for miles. Could shape iron like it was clay. But he had a temper, and he wasn't above cutting corners. Folks say he'd take on more work than he could handle, then make excuses when he fell behind. Mrs. Cole wasn't the only one waiting on a job." "And enemies?" Poirot asked. "Beyond Monsieur Varne?" Barrow hesitated. "Well, there's talk. Reddick owed money to some, tradesmen mostly, and he wasn't kind to Jacob. Used to berate the lad in front of customers, called him useless. But murder? That's a leap." Poirot nodded, his eyes half closed as if listening to an inner melody. "And the forge itself, describe its routine. Who came and went?" "Mostly just Reddick and Jacob," Barrow said. "Customers now and then, like Mrs. Cole. Delivery boys sometimes, bringing ale or supplies. The night he died, though, Jacob says no one was there after Mrs. Cole left." "Interesting," Poirot murmured. "A forge is a place of labor, yet it becomes a tomb. We must know more of this night." Hastings, pacing by the fire, interjected. "What about the hammer, Poirot?" "Smashed to bits. It's not normal. Could it be the murder weapon?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The hammer is a riddle, Hastings. A blacksmith's hammer is strong, forged to withstand great force. To break it requires intent, or a flaw we have not yet seen. We must examine it closely, but first we return to the forge." The trio made their way back through the village, the sky now bruised with dusk. The forge loomed ahead, its silence oppressive. Inside, Poirot moved with the grace of a dancer, his cane tapping softly as he circled the anvil. The fragments of the hammer still lay scattered, their edges jagged and unnatural. He knelt, his magnifying glass catching the lantern's light as he studied the shards. "Regardes," he said, pointing to a piece of the handle. "The wood is splintered, yes, but the break is clean in places, as if weakened before it shattered. This was no accident of force." Hastings frowned. "You mean someone tampered with it?" "Perhaps," Poirot said. "Or it was made to appear so. The hammer is a distraction, I think, from the true method of death." Constable Barrow, hovering nearby, scratched his head. "But the doctor said poison, didn't he? That chalky stuff on Reddick's lips. Arsenic, maybe?" Poirot's head tilted, his expression unreadable. "Oui, the doctor suspects poison, and I concur. But how was it given? In a locked room, with no one present. That is the heart of our mystery." He moved to Reddick's workbench, where a tin mug sat among a clutter of tools and iron scraps. The mug's rim bore the same chalky residue he had noted on Reddick's lips. Poirot sniffed it cautiously, his nose wrinkling. "Bitter," he said. "This mug held more than ale, I wager." Barrow nodded. "There was a delivery of ale that evening, sir. A cask left at the forge door. No one knows who sent it." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A gift, unclaimed? That is most convenient. We must trace this cask, Constable, and we must speak again with our suspects. Their stories, they are like iron, hard, but not unbreakable." As they left the forge, the village square was emptying, the villagers retreating to their homes. Poirot paused, his gaze sweeping over the cobblestones, the church spire, the distant hills. "This place," he said softly, "it holds its secrets tightly, but Hercule Poirot, he does not rest until the truth is forged." Back at the rusty anvil, Poirot requested paper and pen from Mr. Tully. In the quiet of the parlor, he began to sketch a diagram of the forge, marking the door, the windows, the anvil, the mug. "We must reconstruct the night, Hastings," he said. "Every moment, every movement. The truth lies in the details." Hastings, peering over his shoulder, said, "You think one of them's lying, don't you? Varne's alibi sounds solid, but Mrs. Cole, she's too calm. And Jacob, well, he's hiding something." Poirot smiled faintly. "You see much, mon ami, but you do not yet see clearly. Lies are like shadows. They shift with the light. We shall cast our own light upon this matter." He rose, his movements precise, and addressed Barrow. "Tomorrow we visit Wickham to confirm Monsieur Varne's alibi, and we shall call upon Madame Cole at her estate. As for young Jacob, I think a private conversation is in order. His fear, it speaks louder than his words." The fire crackled, casting long shadows across the room. Poirot's mind, however, was ablaze with possibilities, each suspect a facet of the mystery, each clue a hammer blow shaping the truth. "The forge is silent," he murmured, "but its secrets, they will speak." Chapter 3. The Forge's Secrets. The morning sun struggled through a veil of clouds as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings made their way back to the forge in Ashby Hollow. The village was stirring, its cobblestone paths alive with the clatter of carts and the chatter of early risers. Yet the forge stood apart, its blackened stone walls exuding a somber stillness. Poirot, his overcoat buttoned against the damp chill, walked with a purposeful stride, his cane clicking rhythmically. Hastings, trailing slightly, clutched a notebook, his face a mix of eagerness and unease. "Poirot, I can't shake the feeling we're missing something obvious," Hastings said, his breath visible in the crisp air. "A locked room, a poisoned mug, a smashed hammer. It's like a riddle wrapped in a fog." Poirot's eyes gleamed with that peculiar intensity that signaled his mind was at full tilt. "The fog, mon ami, is merely a challenge to the little gray cells. The forge holds its secrets, but they are not impenetrable. We must examine, observe, and question. Always question." The forge door, its iron bolt now unlatched, creaked as Constable Barrow pushed it open. The interior was as they had left it, dim, cold, and heavy with the scent of ash and iron. Thomas Reddick's body had been removed to the village mortuary, but the anvil, the scattered hammer fragments, and the tin mug remained, silent witnesses to the night of death. Poirot's gaze swept the room, his movements precise as he began his inspection anew. He approached the anvil first, its surface worn but unscarred. "This," he said, tapping it lightly with his cane, "is the heart of the forge, yet it tells us nothing of violence, no blood, no marks of struggle. The death was quiet, subtle." Hastings nodded, scribbling in his notebook. "So the hammer wasn't the weapon. The poison, then? Arsenic, like the doctor suspects?" "Perhaps," Poirot replied, his tone cautious. He moved to the workbench where the tin mug sat among a clutter of tongs and iron rods. The chalky residue on its rim caught the light, a faint but damning clue. Poirot produced a small vial from his pocket and, with a delicate touch, scraped a sample of the residue into it. "This mug, Hastings, is our first true witness. It held the poison, I am certain. But how did it come to be here, and who ensured Reddick drank from it? Constable Barrow, lingering by the door, cleared his throat. "The ale cask, sir. It's still in the back. I had it moved there after we found it. No one's touched it since." "Excellent," Poirot said, his mustache twitching with approval. "Show me." The back room, a cramped space used for storage, was piled with sacks of charcoal and crates of iron ingots. The cask, a small wooden barrel, stood in a corner, its tap glistening with dried ale. Poirot circled it, his magnifying glass glinting as he examined the wood. "No markings," he murmured. "No sign of its origin? Most curious. Who delivers ale without a name?" Barrow shrugged. "Happens sometimes, sir. A gift, maybe, from a customer. Reddick wasn't one to turn down a free drink." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A gift that kills is no gift at all. We must trace this cask, Constable. Its sender holds a key to our mystery." Returning to the main forge, Poirot turned his attention to the windows. Each was barred with iron, the shutters bolted from within. He tested one, finding it immovable. "No entry here," he said. The lock on the door, too, was untouched. This leaves us with a conundrum, a poisoner who leaves no trace of entry or exit. Hastings, peering over Poirot's shoulder, frowned. Could someone have slipped the poison in earlier, before Reddick locked up? A possibility, Poirot conceded. But the ale was delivered that evening, according to Jacob Wren, and Madame Cole saw Reddick alive at 7, already drinking. The timing, it is precise. We must reconstruct it. He moved to the hammer fragments, scattered like broken promises around the anvil. Kneeling, he sifted through them with gloved fingers, his magnifying glass hovering. "These shards," he said, "they tell a story. The handle's break is not natural. See here, the wood is splintered, yes, but there are marks, fine and deliberate, as if it was weakened before it shattered." Hastings leaned closer. "You mean someone sabotaged it? But why?" "To mislead," Poirot said, rising. "To make us think the hammer was the cause of death, or perhaps to mask the true method. It is a distraction, Hastings, but a clever one." Constable Barrow, watching with growing awe, said, "You think the killer planned all this? The poison, the hammer, the locked door?" Poirot's lips curved faintly. "Planning, Constable, is the hallmark of a mind that fears discovery. But no plan is perfect. There is always a flaw, a thread left dangling." He stepped back, his gaze sweeping the forge once more. Near the workbench, he noticed a small pile of ash, finer than the rest, as if something had been burned. He crouched, sifting through it with a pencil. "Curieux," he murmured. "This ash is not from the hearth. It is paper, perhaps, something destroyed to hide its existence." Hastings's eyes widened. "A note? A letter?" "Possibly," Poirot said. "We shall have it analyzed. Even ash may speak if we listen." As they prepared to leave, Dr. Grayson, the village physician, arrived, his face grim under a battered hat. "Mr. Poirot, I've preliminary results from the mortuary," he said, producing a folded paper. "Reddick's death was no accident. The residue on his lips, the dilation of his pupils. It's arsenic, sure as I'm standing here. A slow dose, likely taken hours before he died. I've sent samples to London for confirmation." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Arsenic, you say? A poison that requires patience. And the mug, doctor, would it hold enough to deliver such a dose?" Grayson glanced at the workbench. "Oh, aye, a few sips, if concentrated. Arsenic's tasteless in small amounts, especially in ale." "Bon," Poirot said. "This narrows our path. The poison was in the ale, delivered that evening. But by whom And how did they ensure Reddick alone would drink it? Grayson hesitated. There's something else, sir. Reddick's stomach contents showed bread and cheese, eaten not long before the ale. He wasn't starving. Someone might have known he'd drink to wash it down. Poirot's eyes sparkled. A detail most telling. Merci, doctor. You have given the little gray cells much to ponder. As Grayson departed, Poirot turned to Hastings. We have the method, poison. We have the means, the mug, the ale. But the opportunity, Hastings, that is the lock we must pick. Who was here, unseen, in the moments before Reddick barred the door? Barrow interjected. Jacob Wren said he left at 6, and Mrs. Cole was here at 7. That leaves a window, doesn't it? Oui, Poirot said, but a narrow one. And Elias Varne claims he was in Wickham. We must test these claims, but first we explore the forge further. There are corners yet unexamined. He moved to a small alcove near the hearth, where a wooden box held Reddick's personal effects. A pipe, a leather pouch, a few coins. Inside the pouch, Poirot found a folded scrap of paper, its edges singed as if narrowly spared from fire. He unfolded it carefully, revealing a scrawled note. Settle the debt, or it ends. Mon Dieu, Poirot whispered. A threat, perhaps, or a warning? Hastings peered at it. No signature. Could be from anyone. Varne, Mrs. Cole, even Jacob. Or another, Poirot said. This debt, it may be the spark that lit this tragedy. We must learn what Reddick owed, and to whom. As they stepped outside, the village square was bathed in pale light, the clouds parting briefly. Poirot paused, his gaze distant. The forge, Hastings, it is more than a place of work. It is a crucible of motives, greed, anger, fear. Each suspect carries a flame, but only one set this fire. Constable Barrow, locking the forge behind them, said, What's next, Mr. Poirot? Question the suspects again? Oui, but with precision, Poirot replied. We shall visit Madame Cole's estate, verify Monsieur Varne's alibi in Wickham, and have a quiet word with young Jacob. But first, this note and the ash, they must be sent to London with the doctor's samples. The truth, it is buried, but not beyond reach. Hastings, his notebook now filled with hurried scrawls, said, This feels bigger than we thought, Poirot. A debt, a poison, a broken hammer. It's a devilish puzzle. Poirot's smile was faint but confident. A puzzle, yes, but one that Hercule Poirot will solve. The forge's secrets, they will yield to the order of the little gray cells. As they walked back to the rusty anvil, the village seemed to watch, its silence heavy with unspoken truths. Poirot's mind, however, was alight, each clue a spark forging the path to justice. Chapter 4. The Rival's Alibi. The road to Wickham wound through fields of golden stubble, the late morning sun casting long shadows across the Cotswolds' undulating hills. Hercule Poirot, seated in the rattling carriage beside Captain Hastings, gazed out at the landscape, his green eyes sharp beneath the brim of his hat. His gloved hands rested on his cane, tapping lightly in rhythm with his thoughts. Hastings, ever restless, fiddled with his scarf, his face alight with the prospect of action. Poirot, do you really think Varne's telling the truth? Hastings asked, his voice cutting through the creak of the wheels. He's got the motive, bad blood with Reddick over that stolen commission. And he's a big fellow. He could have smashed that hammer easily. Poirot's mustache curved faintly. Motive, mon ami, is but the kindling. We seek the spark that set it ablaze. Elias Varne's alibi is strong, a tavern full of witnesses, he claims. But the truth, it is like iron. It must be tested under heat. The village of Wickham appeared as they crested a rise. Smaller than Ashby Hollow, but no less quaint, its thatched cottages huddled around a single muddy lane. The Red Lion, Wickham's only tavern, was a low building with a sagging roof and a sign depicting a lion faded to a ghostly outline. Poirot stepped from the carriage with his usual precision, brushing an imaginary speck from his coat as he surveyed the scene. Inside, the Red Lion was dim and smoky, its air thick with the scent of stale ale and damp wood. A handful of locals, their faces weathered by labor, glanced up from their tankards, their conversation faltering at the sight of the immaculate detective and his companion. The tavern keeper, a stout man with a florid face and a stained apron, approached, wiping his hands on a rag. "You must be Hodges," Poirot said, his voice polite but firm. "I am Hercule Poirot, and this is Captain Hastings. We are here about the night Thomas Reddick died in Ashby Hollow." Hodges's eyes widened, and he nodded quickly. I heard about that. Terrible business. Elias Varne said you might come poking about. He was here that night, right enough, drinking till past midnight. Never left my sight, I swear it." Poirot's gaze was unyielding, like a jeweler inspecting a flawed gem. "A busy tavern, Monsieur Hodges, and yet you are certain of this? No moment when your attention wandered? No chance for Monsieur Varne to slip away?" Hodges scratched his neck, his confidence wavering. "Well, it was a lively night. Market day, you see. Lots of folk about. But Elias, he's a regular. Sat at that corner table, cursing Reddick's name over his ale. I'd have noticed if he'd gone." "Curieux," Poirot murmured, his eyes drifting to the corner table, its surface scarred with years of spilled drinks and carved initials. "And what did Monsieur Varne say of Reddick? Be precise, if you please." Hodges hesitated, glancing at the other patrons who were now openly listening. "He was sore, sir. Said Reddick cheated him out of a big job, some fancy gate for Lord Harwood. Called him a thief and worse. But it's just talk, ain't it? Elias is all bluster." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "And no one else can confirm his presence? A barmaid, perhaps, or another patron?" Hodges gestured to a wiry man polishing glasses behind the bar. "Tom there. He was helping me that night. He'd have seen Elias, too." Tom, a gaunt youth with a nervous tic, nodded eagerly when summoned. "Aye, Mr. Varne was here. Drank 3 pints, maybe 4. Didn't move till closing." Poirot's fingers tapped his cane, a subtle rhythm of skepticism. 3 pints, you say? And yet, in a crowded tavern, on a market night, your eyes remained fixed on one man? Most remarkable." Tom flushed, his hands fumbling with the glass. I mean, I saw him now and then. He was there, honest." "Honest," Poirot repeated softly, his tone carrying a weight that made Tom look away. "Merci, gentlemen. You have been most helpful." As they stepped outside, Hastings whispered, "They're covering for him, aren't they? That alibi feels too neat." Poirot's lips twitched. "Neat, yes, but not seamless. A tavern keeper's memory is only as reliable as his coin purse, and young Tom's nervousness betrays uncertainty. We must dig deeper, Hastings. An alibi, like a forged blade, may look strong but crack under pressure." They walked through Wickham's Lane, Poirot's eyes scanning the villagers, a milkmaid balancing pails, a farmer herding geese, a boy polishing boots. "Let us seek another perspective," he said, stopping at a small shop across from the Red Lion. The sign read Wickham Provisions, and inside, an elderly woman with sharp eyes and a knitted shawl was arranging jars of preserves. "Madame," Poirot began, removing his hat with a flourish. "I am Hercule Poirot, investigating a matter from Ashby Hollow. You know of Thomas Reddick's death?" The woman, Mrs. Pym, nodded, her lips pursing. "Heard about it, yes. Nasty business. Folks say it was an accident, but I don't believe it. Reddick had enemies." "Such as Elias Varne?" Poirot asked, his tone gentle but probing. Mrs. Pym's eyes narrowed. "Elias? He's a hothead, always has been. Hated Reddick for stealing that Harwood job. I saw him that night, you know, storming out of the Red Lion around 10. Looked like he was headed somewhere in a hurry." Poirot's mustache quivered, a sign of his mind seizing on a new thread. 10, you say? You are certain?" "As certain as I am of my own name," Mrs. Pym said. "I was closing up shop, and there he was, muttering to himself, heading toward the road to Ashby Hollow." Hastings's eyes widened. "That's only an hour's walk. He could have made it to the forge and back before midnight." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his voice calm but alert. "Madame Pym, did you see Monsieur Varne return?" She shook her head. "No, I was abed by then, but he looked angry enough to do something rash." "Merci, madame," Poirot said, tipping his hat. "Your observation is a lantern in the fog." As they left the shop, Hastings was practically bouncing. "Poirot, this blows Varne's alibi to bits. If he left at 10, he could have slipped to the forge, poisoned the ale, and been back before anyone noticed." Poirot raised a hand, his expression cautionary. "Do not leap, Hastings. A man leaving a tavern does not make him a murderer. We must confirm the timing, the distance, the opportunity. And we must not forget the others. Madame Cole, young Jacob, each has their own shadow to cast." They returned to the carriage, the driver dozing under his hat. Poirot paused, his gaze distant, as if seeing the forge across the miles. "Let us calculate," he said, producing a small notebook. "Wickham to Ashby Hollow is 3 miles, a brisk walk, perhaps 40 minutes each way. If Varne left at 10, he could reach the forge by 11. Mrs. Cole saw Reddick alive at 7, and Jacob claims he left at 6. The ale was delivered sometime that evening. The window narrows, but it does not close." Hastings frowned. "But the locked door, Poirot. How could Varne get in and out?" "That," Poirot said, "is the lock we have yet to pick. Perhaps he did not need to enter. The ale, delivered to the forge door, could have been tampered with before Reddick took it inside." Back in Ashby Hollow, they stopped at the rusty anvil to confer with Constable Barrow, who was nursing a pint in the parlor. Poirot relayed Mrs. Pym's account, watching Barrow's face for a reaction. "Elias, leaving the Red Lion?" Barrow said, his brow furrowing. "That's news to me. Hodges swore he was there all night." "Swore, yes," Poirot said, "but oaths are not proof. We must speak with Monsieur Varne again. His story, it begins to fray." Barrow nodded, draining his pint. "I'll fetch him tomorrow, sir. He's not one to take kindly to questions, though." "Then we shall ask with care," Poirot said, his smile faint but resolute. "The truth, Constable, is a delicate thing, but it cannot hide from Hercule Poirot." As they retired to their rooms at the inn, Hastings lingered by the fire, his mind racing. "Poirot, if Varne's alibi is shaky, he's our man, isn't he? The feud, the opportunity, it all fits." Poirot, adjusting his tie in a small mirror, shook his head. "It fits, yes, but too neatly, perhaps. A true criminal does not leave such obvious tracks. We must consider all possibilities. Varne's anger, Madame Cole's impatience, Jacob's fear. And the ale cask, Hastings, it is the silent witness we must make speak. He turned, his eyes gleaming in the firelight. "Tomorrow, we visit Madame Cole. Her calm, it is too perfect. And young Jacob, his nervousness, it hides more than he admits. The forge's secrets are many, but they will not elude us long." The fire crackled, casting shadows that danced like the questions in Poirot's mind. Outside, the village settled into night, its silence a canvas for the truth yet to be forged. Chapter 5. The Widow's Tale. The morning mist clung to the fields of Ashby Hollow as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings set out for Cole Manor, the estate of Margaret Cole. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and fading autumn blooms, and the lane to the manor wound past hedgerows and a quiet brook. Poirot, his overcoat pristine despite the muddy path, walked with his usual precision, his cane tapping a steady rhythm. Hastings, bundled in a scarf, kept pace, his eyes bright with anticipation. "Poirot, I've been thinking," Hastings said, his voice cutting through the morning's hush. "Mrs. Cole's got the means, money to buy poison, influence to cover her tracks, and she was at the forge that night. What if she slipped something into Reddick's ale before she left?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of amusement or skepticism, or both. "You weave a tale, mon ami, but it is yet a thread, not a tapestry. Madame Cole's composure, it is formidable, but is it the calm of innocence or the mask of guilt? We shall see." Cole Manor loomed ahead, a Georgian edifice of weathered stone, its windows glinting like watchful eyes. Ivy climbed its walls, and the gardens, though well kept, bore a hint of neglect, as if mourning their late master. A maid, her apron crisp, opened the heavy oak door and led them to a drawing-room where Margaret Cole awaited. The room was a study in restrained elegance, polished oak panels, a marble fireplace, and heavy damask curtains that softened the morning light. Margaret Cole rose from a high-backed chair, her silver hair pinned beneath a velvet hat, her dress a somber shade of charcoal. Her sapphire ring caught the light as she extended a hand, her expression one of polite curiosity. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," she said, her voice smooth as polished stone. "I expected your visit. The village is abuzz with talk of poor Mr. Reddick's death. Please, sit." Poirot settled into a chair, his posture impeccable, his green eyes fixed on her. "Madame Cole, you are most gracious to receive us. We seek the truth about Thomas Reddick's final hours, and you, I understand, were among the last to see him alive." Margaret's lips tightened briefly, but her composure held. "Indeed. I visited the forge at 7 that evening to inquire about a gate I had commissioned for my late husband's memorial. It was to be a tribute, a wrought-iron piece for the estate's entrance. Reddick promised delivery by Michaelmas, but when I arrived, he was indisposed." "Indisposed?" Poirot's tone was gentle, but his gaze was piercing. "Elaborate, if you please." She folded her hands, the sapphire ring glinting. "He was drunk, Monsieur Poirot, slurring his words, unsteady on his feet. He rambled about debts and promises broken, though I could make little sense of it. I pressed him about the gate, but he was dismissive, almost rude. I left shortly after, perhaps 10 minutes past 7. He was very much alive." Hastings, scribbling in his notebook, leaned forward. "And you saw no one else? No sign of the apprentice, Jacob Wren, or anyone delivering ale?" "None," she replied, her voice firm. "The forge was quiet, save for Reddick's muttering. I returned home directly." Poirot's fingers traced the handle of his cane, his mind cataloguing her words. This ale, madame. Did you see a cask, a mug, anything of the sort? Margaret hesitated, her eyes narrowing, slightly. There was a mug on his workbench, I believe. I paid it no mind. As for a cask, I saw none, but the forge was cluttered. Such things could easily go unnoticed. Cluttered, oui, Poirot said softly. And yet you noticed Reddick's state so keenly. Tell me, madame, did he speak of anyone specific? A rival, perhaps, or his apprentice? She shook her head, her expression unwavering. He mentioned no names. His words were a jumble, debts, excuses, nothing more. I was frustrated, naturally, but I had no cause to harm him. Poirot nodded, his smile polite but enigmatic. Your frustration, it is understandable. A commission delayed is a promise broken. And yet, you remained calm, non? Margaret's lips curved faintly, a trace of steel in her gaze. I am a woman of means, Monsieur Poirot, and I have learned to temper my emotions. Reddick's delays were an inconvenience, not a motive for murder. Hastings, unable to resist, interjected. But you were angry, weren't you? Enough to confront him alone at the forge? Her eyes flicked to Hastings, cool and assessing. Anger, Captain, does not make one a killer. I sought answers, not violence. I left him alive, and I have nothing more to add. Poirot rose, his movements deliberate. Merci, Madame Cole. Your account is most illuminating. We may call again as the little gray cells continue their work. As they left the drawing-room, the maid escorted them through the manor's hall, where portraits of stern-faced Coles gazed down. Outside, the mist had lifted, revealing the estate's sprawling grounds. Hastings, his notebook tucked away, said, "She's hiding something, Poirot. That calm, it's unnatural. And she saw the mug. She could have slipped the poison in." Poirot's eyes gleamed as they climbed into the waiting carriage. Calm, Hastings, is a shield, but shields have cracks. Madame Cole's story is precise, but it lacks warmth. She observes, yet she reveals little. We must probe further. The carriage jolted back toward Ashby Hollow, and Poirot produced his small notebook, sketching a timeline. "Regardez," he said, tapping the page. "Madame Cole visits at 7, finds Reddick drunk. Jacob Wren claims he left at 6. The ale cask, delivered that evening, is our poison's vessel. But who sent it, and when?" Hastings frowned. She didn't mention the cask, but she saw the mug. If she's telling the truth, the ale was already there. Could the poison have been added earlier? Possible, Poirot said, but unlikely. Arsenic, as Dr. Grayson suggests, acts slowly. Reddick drank that evening and died hours later. The poison was fresh, delivered with intent. Madame Cole's visit places her at the scene, but her story aligns too neatly with the facts we know. They reached the rusty anvil, where Constable Barrow awaited, his face etched with concern. "Any luck at the manor, sir?" he asked, joining them in the inn's parlor. "Luck, Constable, is for those without method," Poirot replied, settling by the fire. Madame Cole confirms she saw Reddick at 7, alive but intoxicated. She speaks of a mug, but not the cask. We must learn more of this delivery. Have you traced its source? Barrow shook his head. "Not yet, sir. No one in the village admits to sending it. The cask's unmarked, no brewery stamp. It's as if it appeared from nowhere." Poirot's fingers steepled, his mind a whirl of connections. "Nothing appears from nowhere, Constable. Someone placed it at the forge door, knowing Reddick would drink. We must question the village's delivery boys, the shopkeepers. Someone saw something." Hastings, warming his hands by the fire, said, "What about the note you found, Poirot?" "Settle the debt. or it ends. Could Mrs. Cole be the creditor? Poirot's eyes narrowed. A possibility, but her wealth suggests she had no need to threaten Reddick over money. The note's tone is desperate, personal. We must consider other debts, perhaps not of coin, but of loyalty or secrets. Barrow cleared his throat. There's talk in the village, sir, about Reddick's debts. He owed money to a grain merchant, Mr. Fowler, and there were rumors he'd borrowed from less savory types in Wickham. Could one of them have sent the ale? Bon, Poirot said. We shall speak with this Fowler, and we must investigate these Wickham connections. But first, we return to the forge. There is one detail I wish to examine again. The forge was as they had left it, its silence oppressive. Poirot moved to the workbench, his magnifying glass catching the light as he studied the mug once more. This residue, he said, it is consistent, but faint. The poison was subtle, mixed to avoid detection. Madame Cole saw this mug, yet claims ignorance of its contents. Her story, it is plausible, but not certain. He turned to the alcove, where he had found the singed note, sifting through the ash pile again. A tiny fragment, overlooked before, caught his eye. A scrap of paper with a single word. Promise. Poirot held it up, his expression thoughtful. Another piece of the puzzle, Hastings. A promise broken, a debt unpaid. These are the threads of motive. Hastings, peering over his shoulder, said, This is getting murkier, Poirot. Mrs. Cole, Varn, Jacob. Any of them could have sent that note, or the ale. Oui, Poirot said, pocketing the fragment. But the truth, it is like a blade in the forge. It requires heat to take shape. We shall apply that heat, starting with young Jacob Wren. His fear, it is a beacon we cannot ignore. As they left the forge, the village square was quiet, the villagers casting wary glances. Poirot's mind, however, was ablaze, each clue a spark in the crucible of his thoughts. Madame Cole has spoken, he murmured, but her tale is only one verse. The song of the forge, it has more to sing. Chapter 6. The Apprentice's Burden. The late afternoon sun cast a golden haze over Ashby Hollow, softening the stark outline of the forge as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings approached the narrow staircase leading to Jacob Wren's attic room. The village was settling into the quiet rhythm of evening, with the clink of tankards from the rusty anvil and the distant bleat of sheep the only sounds breaking the stillness. Poirot, his overcoat immaculate despite the day's exertions, climbed the creaking steps with measured precision, his cane tapping a deliberate cadence. Hastings followed, his notebook tucked under his arm, his face alight with curiosity. Poirot, that boy Jacob, he's been jittery from the start, Hastings said, his voice low as they reached the attic door. He's hiding something. I'd bet my hat on it. Did you see how he couldn't meet your eyes at the inn? Poirot's mustache gave a subtle twitch, a sign of his mind turning over the puzzle's pieces. Oui, mon ami. Young Jacob's fear is a thread that runs through this mystery. Fear, it is a powerful motivator, perhaps to silence, perhaps to act. We shall discover which. He knocked sharply on the door, its warped wood rattling under his gloved knuckles. A muffled shuffle came from within, followed by Jacob Wren's hesitant voice. Who's there? Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings, Poirot announced, his tone firm but not unkind. We wish to speak with you, Monsieur Wren. It is a matter most urgent. The door opened slowly, revealing Jacob's pale face, his freckles stark against his ashen skin. His brown eyes darted between the two men, and his ink-stained hands clutched the door-frame as if for support. I told you all I know, sir," he stammered, stepping aside to let them in. "I didn't see nothing that night." The attic room was cramped and cluttered, its sloped ceiling pressing down like a weight. A narrow bed, a rickety table, and a single chair occupied the space. But what caught Poirot's eye was the collection of books stacked haphazardly on a shelf. Titles on chemistry, botany, and metallurgy gleamed in the dim light from a small window, their spines worn from frequent use. A bottle of ink and a quill lay on the table, beside a notebook filled with cramped handwriting and diagrams. Poirot's gaze lingered on the books, his expression one of quiet interest. "You are a scholar, Monsieur Wren?" he asked, his voice gentle but probing. "Such studies are unusual for an apprentice blacksmith, non?" Jacob flushed, his hands twisting his cap. Just a hobby, sir. I like to read, to learn things. Master Reddick didn't approve, said it distracted me from the forge." Poirot picked up the chemistry book, its pages marked with notes in Jacob's precise script. "And this? You study poisons, perhaps? Arsenic, for example?" Jacob's eyes widened, and he took a step back, nearly tripping over a stool. "No, sir. I mean, I read about all sorts, but not for anything like that. I swear it." Hastings, standing by the door, raised an eyebrow. "Bit of a coincidence, don't you think? Arsenic in Reddick's mug, and you with a book on chemistry?" Jacob's hands trembled, and he sank onto the bed, his voice barely a whisper. "I didn't do nothing, sir. I left the forge at 6, like I said. Master Reddick was fine then." Poirot set the book down, his movements deliberate, and turned to face Jacob. "Let us speak plainly, Monsieur Wren. You were afraid of Thomas Reddick, were you not? He was a hard master, perhaps cruel. Did he threaten you? Did he know something you wished to keep hidden?" Jacob's gaze dropped to the floor, his shoulders hunching. He was tough, shouted a lot, called me useless. But I didn't hate him. He taught me the trade, gave me a place to stay. Poirot's eyes narrowed, catching the flicker of evasion in Jacob's face. "And yet, you tremble. You avoid my gaze. There is more, I think. A secret, perhaps? A debt, like the one mentioned in the note we found. Settle the debt, or it ends. What did Reddick know about you?" Jacob's head snapped up, his eyes wide with panic. "Note? I don't know about no note, sir. I never saw it." Poirot stepped closer, his voice soft but relentless. "Do not play the innocent, Monsieur Wren. The forge was your domain as much as Reddick's. You were there daily, handling his tools, his supplies. Did you see the ale cask delivered that night? Did you know its sender?" Jacob shook his head frantically. "No, sir. I left early, like I said. Master Reddick told me to go, said he had business. I didn't see no cask, no nothing." Hastings, unable to contain himself, interjected. "Business? At 6 in the evening? What kind of business keeps an apprentice out of the forge?" "I don't know." Jacob's voice cracked, his hands clenching into fists. "He didn't tell me. He just said to go home, so I did. I stayed here, reading, till morning." Poirot's gaze flicked to the notebook on the table, its pages filled with chemical equations and sketches of plants. He opened it carefully, noting a diagram of a distillation process. "You are meticulous, Monsieur Wren," he said. "These notes, they show a mind that plans, that calculates. Did you calculate something for your master, perhaps? Something to silence his threats?" Jacob leapt to his feet, his face flushed. "I didn't hurt him. I cared for him in my way. He was hard, but he was all I had. You've got to believe me." Poirot's expression softened, but his eyes remained sharp. "Belief, Monsieur Wren, must be earned by truth. You hide something, and it weighs upon you. Speak now, and lighten that burden." Jacob sank back onto the bed, his shoulders shaking. For a moment it seemed he might confess, but he only shook his head, his voice barely audible. "I've told you all I know, sir. I swear it." Poirot nodded, his face unreadable, and turned to the small window overlooking the forge. "Very well, we shall leave you for now. But the truth, it has a way of finding the light, Monsieur Wren." As they descended the stairs, Hastings whispered, "He's cracking, Poirot. Did you see his hands? He's scared witless." "Scared, oui," Poirot replied. "But of what? Guilt or merely fear of accusation? His books, his notes, they suggest a mind capable of crafting poison, but capability is not proof. We must be methodical." Outside, the village square was bathed in the fading light, the forge's silhouette stark against the sky. Constable Barrow approached, his face etched with concern. "Any luck with the lad, sir?" Poirot's lips curved faintly. "Luck, Constable, is not our method. Young Jacob is a puzzle, but one piece is clear. He fears something beyond our questions. We must learn what." Barrow nodded, pulling his coat tighter against the evening chill. "I've got news, sir. The grain merchant, Mr. Fowler, says Reddick owed him £50 for supplies. He's been pressing for payment, but swears he didn't send no ale cask." £50, Poirot murmured, his eyes gleaming. "A debt, yes, but not the one in our note, I think. The note's tone was personal, urgent. We must look closer to Reddick's circle, those who knew him intimately." Hastings, flipping through his notebook, said, "What about the ash you found, Poirot?" "That burned paper. Could Jacob have destroyed something incriminating?" "Possible," Poirot said, his voice thoughtful. "The fragment with promise. It suggests a vow broken, a trust betrayed. Jacob's studies, his fear, they point to a secret he guards closely. But we need more." They returned to the rusty anvil, where the parlor's fire offered warmth against the growing dusk. Poirot sat, his fingers steepled, his mind a whirl of connections. "Let us consider," he said, sketching in his notebook. "Jacob leaves at 6, Madame Cole visits at 7, Reddick is found dead at dawn. The ale cask, unmarked, arrives sometime that evening. The note, the ash, the chemistry book, these are threads, but they do not yet weave a pattern." Hastings leaned forward, his voice eager. "What's our next move, Poirot? Back to Varne, or Mrs. Cole again?" Poirot's eyes sparkled in the firelight. "Neither, for now. We await the London analysis of the ash and the mug's residue, and we must trace the ale cask's origin. Someone in this village saw it delivered. Tomorrow, we question the shopkeepers, the delivery boys, and Jacob Wren, he will face the little gray cells again. His burden, it will not remain hidden." The fire crackled, casting shadows that danced like the secrets of Ashby Hollow. Poirot's mind, however, was a forge of its own, shaping clues into the form of truth, one careful strike at a time. Chapter 7. The Poison's Path. The morning light filtered through the heavy curtains of the rusty anvil's parlor, casting a muted glow over the oak table where Hercule Poirot sat, his breakfast untouched. His gloved fingers traced the rim of a teacup, but his green eyes were distant, fixed on some invisible thread of the mystery that consumed him. Captain Hastings, seated opposite, buttered a slice of toast with rather more vigor than necessary, his restlessness betraying his eagerness to press on with the investigation. "Poirot, I can't stop thinking about that cask," Hastings said, his voice breaking the quiet. "Someone sent it, knowing Reddick would drink. It's so deliberate. Poison in a locked room. But how did they know he'd be alone?" Poirot's mustache gave a faint quiver, a sign of his mind stirring. "The how, mon ami, is the lock we must pick, but the why. It is the key. Arsenic is not a weapon of impulse. It is chosen with care, with patience. We must trace its path, from the cask to the mug to Reddick's lips." A knock at the parlor door announced Constable Barrow, his face flushed from the morning chill. He carried a sealed envelope, its edges stamped with the mark of a London laboratory. "This just came, Mr. Poirot," he said, handing it over. "Dr. Grayson says it's the analysis you asked for." Poirot's eyes gleamed as he broke the seal, scanning the typed report with meticulous care. "Bon?" he murmured. "The residue in the mug is confirmed. Arsenic in a concentrated dose. Enough to kill, but slow, taking perhaps 2 to 3 hours. Reddick's stomach contents show ale, bread, and cheese, as Dr. Grayson noted. The poison was in the ale, without doubt." Hastings leaned forward, his toast forgotten. 2 to 3 hours? So if Mrs. Cole saw him at 7, he drank the poisoned ale some time after, and died around 9 or 10? "Précisément," Poirot said, folding the report. "The timeline narrows. Jacob Wren claims he left at 6, Madame Cole departed at 10 past 7, and the cask was delivered that evening. We must pinpoint when and by whom." Barrow shifted uneasily. "I've asked around, sir. No one in the village admits to delivering that cask. It's like it came from thin air." Poirot's smile was faint but sharp. "Nothing comes from thin air, Constable. Someone placed it at the forge door, and someone saw it done. We shall find them." He rose, adjusting his coat, and gestured for Hastings and Barrow to follow. "To the forge, mes amis, the scene of the crime. It holds more to tell us." The forge was as they had left it, its air heavy with the ghosts of fire and iron. The anvil stood silent, the hammer fragments scattered like a broken vow. Poirot moved to the workbench, where the tin mug still sat, its chalky residue a stark accusation. He examined it again, his magnifying glass catching the light as he studied the rim. "This mug," he said, "it is the vessel of death. The arsenic was mixed with the ale, but how? In the cask itself or added later? And why this mug, so plainly left for us to find?" Hastings, peering over his shoulder, said, "Could the killer have poisoned the mug directly? Slipped it in while Reddick wasn't looking?" Poirot shook his head. "Unlikely, Hastings. Reddick was alive and drinking when Madame Cole saw him. The poison was in the ale before it reached the mug, I think. The cask, it is our focus." He turned to the back room, where the unmarked cask stood among sacks of charcoal. Kneeling, he inspected its tap, noting a faint stickiness around the spout. "Curieux," he murmured, scraping a sample into a vial. "This residue, it may match the mug's. We shall send it to London for comparison." Barrow, watching with growing respect, said, "You think the cask was tampered with before it reached the forge?" "Possible," Poirot said, rising. "Or it was crafted for this purpose, a special brew, shall we say. We must find its origin. Have you questioned the village's ale suppliers?" Barrow nodded. "Aye, sir. The Rusty Anvil gets its ale from a brewery in Wickham, but they swear no unmarked casks left their yard. I've got a lad checking other suppliers in the area." "Bon," Poirot said, And the delivery boys? Someone carried this cask to the forge door. I've got names, Barrow said. Young Peter Hale delivers for the grocer, and there's a lad from Wickham, Ned Carter, who runs errands. Neither's admitted to it, but I'll press them. Poirot's eyes sparkled. Press gently, constable, but firmly. A boy may not know the weight of what he carries, but he will remember the hand that gave it to him. They stepped outside, the village square stirring with midday activity. Poirot paused, his gaze sweeping the cobblestones, as if the stones themselves might whisper a clue. "Let us consider the poison's path," he said, sketching in his notebook. "The cask arrives, Reddick drinks, the mug is left, the hammer is broken, the door is locked. This is not a crime of passion, but of calculation." Hastings, flipping through his own notes, said, "What about Jacob's chemistry book? Arsenic's not hard to come by, is it? He could have mixed it himself." "True," Poirot conceded, "but arsenic is common in many trades, rat poison, dyes, even medicines. Madame Cole, with her wealth, could procure it discreetly. Elias Varne, as a blacksmith, might access it through his suppliers. The question is not who could obtain it, but who had the opportunity to deliver it." Barrow interjected, "There's something else, sir. I spoke to Mr. Fowler, the grain merchant. He says Reddick's debt was real, £50, like I told you, but he swears he never sent a note and certainly no ale. He's a church-going man, not the threatening sort." Poirot's fingers steepled, his mind a whirl of connections. "The note? Settle the debt, or it ends. It speaks of more than money, I think. A personal debt, a betrayal. And the fragment with promise. It suggests a bond broken. We must look closer to Reddick's life, his secrets." Hastings frowned. "You think Jacob's the key, don't you? His fear, his books? It all points to him." "Points, yes," Poirot said, "but pointing is not proof. Jacob's fear may be of discovery, or it may be of something else. Perhaps he knows more than he dares say. We shall speak with him again, but first we pursue the cask." They returned to the rusty anvil, where Poirot dispatched Barrow to question the delivery boys. In the parlor, he spread his notebook on the table, sketching a map of the forge and its surroundings. "Regardez," he said to Hastings. "The forge is isolated, yet accessible. The cask was left at the door, unseen by Madame Cole or Jacob. This suggests a delivery after 7, when Madame Cole departed, but before Reddick locked the door." Hastings nodded, his eyes bright. "So the killer knew Reddick's habits, knew he'd drink alone that night." "Précisément," Poirot said. "This is no stranger's crime. It is intimate, planned by one who knew Reddick's ways. We must learn more of his evenings, his routines." A knock interrupted them, and the innkeeper, Mr. Tully, entered, his face apologetic. "Beg pardon, sir, but there's a lad here, Peter Hale, the grocer's boy. Says he's got something to tell you." Peter, a gangly youth with a shock of red hair, shuffled in, his cap clutched tightly. "Constable said you're asking about the ale cask, sir," he said, his voice trembling. I didn't deliver it, I swear, but I saw something that night. A cart parked near the forge just after dusk. Didn't recognize it, and the driver kept his face down, like he didn't want to be seen." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A cart, you say? Describe it, Monsieur Hale." "It was small, sir, with a canvas cover, dark, maybe black. I couldn't see much, too foggy. But it was there, right by the forge, around 7:30. Hastings's jaw dropped. 7:30? That's just after Mrs. Cole left." "Oui," Poirot said, his voice soft but intense. A cart, a cask, a shadowed figure. The path of the poison grows clearer. Merci, Peter. You have been most helpful. As the boys scurried out, Poirot turned to Hastings. This cart, it is our first true lead. We must find it and its driver, and we must press Jacob Wren further. His silence, it is a wall, but walls can be breached. The fire in the parlor crackled, its warmth a stark contrast to the chill of the mystery. Poirot's mind, however, was a forge of its own, hammering clues into shape, each spark bringing him closer to the truth. Chapter 8. The Broken Hammer. The afternoon sky over Ashby Hollow was heavy with clouds, casting a somber pall over the village as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings made their way back to the forge. The air carried a damp chill, and the cobblestones glistened with the threat of rain. Poirot, his overcoat buttoned tightly, moved with his characteristic precision, his cane tapping a steady rhythm against the ground. Hastings, clutching his notebook, hurried to keep pace, his mind abuzz with the latest revelations. Poirot, that cart Peter Hale saw. It's a breakthrough, isn't it? Hastings said, his voice tinged with excitement. Someone delivered that cask after Mrs. Cole left, and before Reddick locked up. It's got to be the key to the whole thing. Poirot's green eyes flickered, his mustache giving a subtle twitch. A breakthrough, oui, but a key? Not yet, mon ami. The cart is a shadow in our puzzle, but shadows must be chased to reveal their source. We return to the forge to seek another truth, the broken hammer. It is a riddle that speaks loudly, if we listen. The forge loomed ahead, its blackened stone walls stark against the gray sky. Constable Barrow met them at the door, his face etched with the weariness of a man grappling with a mystery beyond his ken. "Back again, Mr. Poirot," he said, pushing the door open. "I've had the place watched, like you asked. No one's touched a thing." "Bon," Poirot said, stepping inside. The forge was as they had left it, its air heavy with the scent of cold ash and iron. The anvil stood silent, the tin mug on the workbench a mute witness to Reddick's final moments. But it was the hammer fragments, scattered like shards of a broken promise, that drew Poirot's attention. He knelt beside the anvil, his gloved fingers sifting through the debris with the care of an archaeologist. The hammer's head, splintered into jagged pieces, glinted dully in the dim light. The handle, broken at its base, bore marks that intrigued him. Fine, deliberate scratches, as if scored with a blade. "Regardez," he said, holding up a fragment for Hastings and Barrow to see. "This break, it is not natural. The wood was weakened, perhaps with a tool, to ensure it would shatter under force." Hastings's eyes widened. "You mean someone sabotaged it? But why go to all that trouble? If Reddick was poisoned, what's the point of breaking his hammer?" Poirot rose, dusting his gloves with a handkerchief. "The point, Hastings, is misdirection. The hammer, it draws the eye, makes us question. Was it the weapon? Was it an accident? It clouds the truth, which is that poison, not force, killed Thomas Reddick. This was a mind at work, one that planned not just death, but deception." Barrow scratched his head, his brow furrowing. "So the killer broke the hammer to throw us off? That's clever, sir. Devilishly clever." "Clever, oui," Poirot said, his voice soft but intense. "But no one outwits Hercule Poirot for long. We must know more of this hammer, its make, its flaws." He turned to Barrow. "Constable, is there a metallurgist in Ashby Hollow? Someone who knows the craft of tools?" Barrow nodded. "Mr. Tuttle, sir, lives just outside the village. He's retired now, but he used to forge tools for half the county. knows more about iron than anyone." "Excellent," Poirot said. "We shall visit Monsieur Tuttle. But first, let us examine the forge once more. There may be other clues hidden in its shadows." Poirot moved to the workbench, his magnifying glass catching the light as he studied the surrounding tools. A pair of tongs, a chisel, and a file lay in disarray, but nothing seemed out of place. He paused at a small iron box tucked beneath the bench, its lid slightly ajar. Inside, he found a collection of nails, a whetstone, and a small vial of oil. Nothing remarkable, yet he lingered, his mind turning. "This box," he said, "it is a place for essentials." Yet Reddick, a man of order in his craft, left it open. Why? Hastings shrugged. Maybe he was in a hurry? Or drunk, like Mrs. Cole said? "Perhaps," Poirot said, his tone thoughtful. "Or perhaps it held something else, something removed before we arrived." He turned to the back room, where the unmarked ale cask stood among crates and sacks. The sticky residue around its tap caught his eye again, and he made a mental note to compare it with the mug's contents once the London analysis arrived. "The cask, the mug, the hammer," he murmured. "They form a trinity of deception, each pointing to the other, yet none revealing the hand behind them." Barrow, hovering nearby, said, "I've got Peter Hale and Ned Carter coming to the inn later, sir. I'll ask them about that cart again. Maybe one of them saw more than they let on." "Bon," Poirot said. "And the note, settle the debt or it ends." "Have you learned more of Reddick's creditors?" Barrow shook his head. "Fowler's the main one, like I said. £50, overdue for months. But he's adamant he didn't send no note or cask. I'm checking with a few others. Small debts, mostly, to shopkeepers and the like." Poirot nodded, his eyes distant. "The note, it is personal, not mercantile. A debt of honor, perhaps, or betrayal. We must look to those closest to Reddick, his apprentice, his rival, his client." They left the forge and made their way to Mr. Tuttle's cottage, a modest dwelling on the village's edge, its garden overgrown with late-season weeds. Tuttle, a wiry man with hands scarred from years at the anvil, greeted them with a nod, his eyes sharp despite his age. "Mr. Poirot, is it?" he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Heard you're sniffing around Reddick's death. What's this about a hammer?" Poirot produced a fragment of the broken handle, wrapped in a handkerchief. This, Monsieur Tuttle, was Thomas Reddick's hammer. It shattered, but not by chance. "Can you tell us of its make?" Tuttle took the fragment, turning it over with practiced fingers. His brow furrowed as he examined the wood and the metal shard still attached. "This is good oak, bound with iron," he said. "Reddick's work, I'd wager. He made his own tools. But look here." He pointed to the scratches Poirot had noted. "These ain't wear and tear. Someone scored the handle, weakened it deliberate-like. A good strike would have snapped it clean." Hastings's jaw dropped. "So it was tampered with. Could it have been done in the forge?" Tuttle nodded. "Easy enough, if you know what you're doing. A file or a knife could score the wood, make it brittle. Reddick wouldn't have noticed till he swung it." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And who, Monsieur Tuttle, would have such knowledge? Another blacksmith, perhaps?" Tuttle shrugged. "Anyone with a bit of craft could manage it. Reddick's apprentice, young Jacob, would know how. So would Elias Varn, over in Wickham. Even a layman could figure it out with time." "Time," Poirot murmured, "and intent. Merci, Monsieur Tuttle. You have forged a vital link in our chain." As they left the cottage, Hastings was practically bouncing. "Poirot, this proves it was no accident. The hammer was sabotaged, just like you thought. But who? Jacob was in the forge all the time. He'd have the chance. Chance? We? Poirot said, his voice calm but intense. But motive? Jacob's fear suggests a secret, but not necessarily murder. Varn, with his feud, could have tampered with the hammer to stage a scene, and Madame Cole, her wealth, could buy such subtle sabotage. We must not rush to conclusions. Back at the rusty anvil, they found Peter Hale waiting, his red hair disheveled from nervous tugging. "I thought more about that cart, sir," he said, glancing at Barrow. "I didn't see the driver's face, but he wore a dark cloak, and the cart had a loose wheel. Squeaked something awful." Poirot's mustache twitched. "A squeaking wheel, you say? Most useful, Monsieur Hale. Did you see where it went after the forge?" Peter shook his head. "Lost it in the fog, sir, but it headed toward the Wickham Road." "The Wickham Road," Poirot repeated, his mind racing. "Where Elias Varn claims he spent the evening? The threads, they begin to weave." Hastings, scribbling furiously, said, "What now, Poirot? We've got the hammer, the cart, the note. Everything's pointing to someone close to Reddick." Poirot's smile was faint but resolute. "Now, Hastings, we tighten the net. We question Ned Carter, the Wickham delivery boy. We await the London analysis of the cask's residue, and we prepare to confront our suspects again. The hammer, it was broken to hide the truth, but the truth, it will not stay silent." The parlor fire crackled, its warmth a stark contrast to the cold clarity of Poirot's mind. Outside, the village settled into dusk, its secrets trembling under the weight of his scrutiny. Chapter 9. The apprentice's confession. The evening air in Ashby Hollow carried a sharp bite, the first whisper of winter creeping into the Cotswolds. The rusty anvil's parlor glowed with the warmth of its hearth, but the atmosphere within was taut with anticipation as Hercule Poirot prepared to confront Jacob Wren once more. The diminutive detective sat by the fire, his posture impeccable, his gloved hands folded over the head of his cane. His green eyes, sharp as cut glass, betrayed the relentless workings of his mind. Captain Hastings paced near the window, his notebook open, his impatience barely contained. "Poirot, we're closing in, aren't we?" Hastings said, his voice low but eager. "The cart, the sabotaged hammer, Jacob's chemistry book, it's all pointing to him. He's got to crack soon." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint sign of his inner calculations. "Patience, mon ami. The truth, it is like iron in the forge. It must be heated slowly to take shape. Young Jacob's fear is a beacon, but we must guide him to reveal its source, not force it." Constable Barrow entered, his face flushed from the cold, escorting a pale and trembling Jacob Wren. The apprentice's freckled face was drawn, his ink-stained hands twisting his cap into a crumpled mess. His brown eyes darted nervously, avoiding Poirot's gaze as he was ushered to a chair. "Monsieur Wren," Poirot began, his voice gentle but with an edge of steel. "We meet again. You have told us you left the forge at 6, that you saw nothing, heard nothing. And yet the facts, they speak a different story. A cask of ale, poisoned with arsenic. A hammer deliberately weakened. A note threatening a debt. You, who worked closest to Thomas Reddick, must know more than you claim." Jacob's shoulders hunched, his voice barely audible. I told you, sir. I didn't do nothing. I was in my room, reading. I swear it." Poirot leaned forward, his eyes locking onto Jacob's. "Swear, you say, but oaths are fragile when built on fear. You fear something, Monsieur Wren. Is it guilt? Or is it discovery of a secret your master held over you? Jacob's hands shook, and he gripped the arms of the chair as if anchoring himself against a storm. He was hard, sir. Master Reddick, he shouted, called me useless, but I didn't hate him. He was teaching me, giving me a chance. Hastings, unable to stay silent, interjected. A chance? With a chemistry book full of notes on poisons? You expect us to believe that's just a hobby? Jacob's eyes widened, his voice rising in panic. It's true. I read to learn, to better myself. Master Reddick didn't like it, said it made me soft, but I never thought of hurting him. Poirot raised a hand, silencing Hastings. His tone was calm, almost soothing, but his words cut deep. Let us consider, Monsieur Wren, the note we found. Settle the debt, or it ends. The fragment with promise. These suggest a bond broken, a trust betrayed. Did Reddick know something about you, something you could not bear to have revealed? Jacob's face crumpled, and for a moment it seemed he might flee. But he sank back, his voice breaking. He knew things, sir, about me, things I did before I came to Ashby Hollow. Poirot's eyes gleamed, sensing the crack in Jacob's defenses. And what things, Monsieur Wren? Speak plainly, for the truth will find you whether you speak or not. Jacob's hands covered his face, his words muffled by a sob. I stole, sir, small things, back in Wickham, money from a shop where I worked before I apprenticed with Master Reddick. He found out. Someone told him. I don't know who. He said he'd expose me, ruin me, if I didn't work harder, obey him. I was scared, sir, but I didn't kill him. Hastings's jaw dropped, his pencil hovering over his notebook. Stealing? That's motive, Poirot. Reddick was holding it over him. Poirot's expression remained impassive, his mind a whirl of connections. And so, Monsieur Wren, you feared exposure. Did this fear lead you to act? To send a cask of ale, perhaps, laced with arsenic from your studies? Jacob's head snapped up, his eyes wild with desperation. No, I didn't send no cask. I left at 6, like I said. I stayed in my room, reading. I didn't know about the ale till I found him dead. Poirot's fingers steepled, his gaze unrelenting. Yet your book, it contains notes on arsenic, does it not? And you, alone in the forge with Reddick's tools, had the means to weaken his hammer. Tell me, did you break it to create confusion, to mask the poison? Jacob's sobs grew louder, his voice a ragged plea. I didn't mean to kill him, sir. I wanted him sick, that's all, to keep him quiet, to give me time. I read about arsenic in my book, mixed a bit in some ale I sent to the forge. I thought it'd just make him ill, not dead. And the hammer, I broke it after, to make it look like an accident. I was scared, sir. Poirot sat back, his face a mask of calm, though his eyes burned with the triumph of truth revealed. So, you confess, Monsieur Wren. You poisoned the ale, you sabotaged the hammer. But tell me, how did you deliver this cask without being seen? Jacob wiped his eyes, his voice trembling. I didn't use a cask, sir, just a bottle, left at the forge door. I knew he'd drink it, he always did when he worked late. I slipped out after 6, left it, and went back to my room. No one saw me, I swear. Hastings, scribbling furiously, whispered, A bottle? Not a cask? Then where's the cask from? Poirot's smile was faint but sharp. A question, Hastings, that deepens our mystery. Monsieur Wren, you say a bottle, yet we found a cask. Did you see another delivery that night? Jacob shook his head, his face pale. No, sir. I didn't see nothing else. Just my bottle, left by the door. Poirot rose, his movements deliberate. Merci, Monsieur Wren. Your confession, It is a step toward the truth, but not the whole of it. You will remain here under the constable's watch while we verify your words." Barrow, his face a mix of shock and relief, stepped forward. "I'll keep him here, sir. What's next?" Poirot's eyes gleamed in the firelight. "Next, constable, we trace this bottle and the cask. Young Peter Hale spoke of a cart seen near the forge. We must find its driver, and we must confirm the London analysis of the cask's residue. Jacob's confession, it is a spark, but the fire of truth burns wider." As Barrow led Jacob away, Hastings turned to Poirot, his voice urgent. "Poirot, if Jacob's telling the truth, someone else sent the cask. Could there be 2 poisoners?" Poirot's lips curved, his mind already forging the next link. 2 poisoners, Hastings? Or 1, using Jacob's act to mask their own? The cask, the cart, the note, they suggest a hand more cunning than our young apprentices. We must question Elias Varne and Madame Cole again, and we must find this cart with the squeaking wheel. The fire crackled, its shadows dancing across the parlor walls. Outside, Ashby Hollow settled into night, its secrets trembling under Poirot's relentless scrutiny. "The forge," he murmured, "it is silent no longer. Its truths, they begin to speak." Chapter 10. The Final Pieces. The morning sun broke through the clouds over Ashby Hollow, casting a pale light across the village square as Hercule Poirot gathered the suspects in the forge. The air was crisp, tinged with the scent of damp leaves and the faint memory of coal smoke. The forge, its hearth cold and its tools silent, seemed to hold its breath as Poirot stood before the anvil, his overcoat immaculate, his green eyes gleaming with the clarity of truth unveiled. Captain Hastings stood by his side, notebook in hand, his face a mix of anticipation and awe. Constable Barrow, his expression one of quiet respect, kept watch near the door, while Elias Varne, Margaret Cole, and Jacob Wren faced Poirot, each bearing the weight of scrutiny. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice resonant in the stillness, "we stand in the heart of a tragedy, where Thomas Reddick met his end in a room locked from within, with a broken hammer at his side. The village whispers of accident, but Hercule Poirot, he sees murder, a murder most cunning, woven with threads of poison, deception, and fear. Today we unravel these threads." Elias Varne, his broad frame tense, folded his arms, his dark eyes narrowing. "Get on with it, then. I've told you I was in Wickham, drinking at the Red Lion. I had no part in this." Margaret Cole, her silver hair pinned beneath a somber hat, sat with her hands folded, her face a mask of calm. "I have been truthful, Monsieur Poirot. I saw Reddick alive at 7, drunk and incoherent. I left him as I found him." Jacob Wren, pale and trembling, sat, hunched, his ink-stained hands clutching his cap. His confession still hung heavy, his eyes darting as if seeking escape. I told you, sir. I sent the bottle, but I didn't mean to kill him. I swear it." Poirot raised a hand, his gesture commanding silence. "Let us begin with the facts, for facts are the anvil on which truth is forged. Thomas Reddick died of arsenic poisoning, delivered in a mug of ale. The hammer, deliberately weakened, was broken to mislead us. The door was locked, the windows barred, yet death entered. How? The answer lies in the ale, and in the hands that placed it here." He turned to Jacob, his gaze gentle but unyielding. "Monsieur Wren, you have confessed to sending a bottle of ale, laced with arsenic, to make your master ill, not dead. You feared his threats to expose your past thefts. You left this bottle at the forge door after 6, before Madame Cole's visit at 7. This, I believe, is true." Jacob nodded, his voice a whisper. "Yes, sir. I just wanted him quiet for a bit." Poirot's eyes flicked to the others. "But here is the complication. We found a cask, not a bottle, in the forge. Unmarked, delivered that evening, seen by young Peter Hale in a cart with a squeaking wheel near 7:30. This cask, too, contained arsenic, confirmed by the London analysis of its residue, matching that in the mug. 2 deliveries, both poisoned. Why? Hastings, unable to contain himself, blurted, "2 poisoners? That's mad, Poirot." Poirot's smile was faint but sharp. "Not 2, Hastings, but 1, using Jacob's act to mask a darker intent. Let us reconstruct. Jacob's bottle was left at 6, a small dose meant to sicken. Madame Cole visits at 7, sees Reddick drinking from a mug, already unsteady. She leaves, and shortly after, a cart delivers the cask. Reddick, perhaps finishing Jacob's bottle, takes more ale from the cask, unaware it carries a lethal dose. He drinks, locks the door, and dies within hours. The hammer is broken, by Jacob, as he admits, to create confusion, to suggest an accident. Varne's voice cut through, rough with impatience. "What's this got to do with me? I was in Wickham, as Hodges and Tom swore. You've got your killer, Jacob." Poirot turned to him, his eyes narrowing. "Your alibi, Monsieur Varne, it frays. Mrs. Pym saw you leave the Red Lion at 10, heading toward Ashby Hollow. 3 miles, a brisk walk, possible in an hour. You could have reached the forge, but I believe you did not. Your feud with Reddick was real, but your role in this drama is not as the murderer." Varne's shoulders relaxed slightly, though his scowl remained. "Told you I'm clean." Poirot's gaze shifted to Margaret Cole. "Madame Cole, your story is precise. Too precise, perhaps. You saw the mug. You noted Reddick's drunkenness, yet you claim ignorance of the cask. But your wealth, your influence, they give you means to act discreetly. Did you send the cask, knowing Reddick's habits, to ensure his silence?" Margaret's lips tightened, her sapphire ring glinting as she adjusted her shawl. "I am no poisoner, Monsieur Poirot. I sought my gate, nothing more. I had no reason to kill him." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. And yet, someone did. Someone who knew of Jacob's bottle, who saw an opportunity to deepen the crime. The cart, the cask, these were not Jacob's doing. He lacked the means for such a delivery, and his confession rings true in its simplicity. He paced before the anvil, his cane tapping softly. The note? Settle the debt, or it ends, and the fragment with promise. These point to a motive beyond Jacob's fear. Reddick owed more than money. He owed loyalty, perhaps, or silence. The cask's driver, cloaked and unseen, knew the forge's routine, knew Reddick would drink alone. Hastings, his pencil poised, whispered, "Who then?" Not Varne, not Mrs. Cole. Poirot stopped, his eyes blazing with sudden clarity. "The truth, it is simple yet tragic. Jacob Wren, you acted from fear, but your dose was weak, meant only to sicken. Another hand, cunning and bold, sent the cask, ensuring death. But this hand, it is not among us today." He turned to Barrow. "Constable, the cart with the squeaking wheel. Have you traced it?" Barrow nodded, his face grim. "Aye, sir. Ned Carter, the Wickham delivery boy, admitted seeing a cart like it, belonging to a man named Silas Holt, a trader who supplies both villages. Holt's been missing since that night." Poirot's mustache quivered. Silas Holt, a name new to our tale, yet vital. Reddick owed him money, perhaps, or something deeper, a promise broken, a secret shared. Holt sent the cask, knowing of Jacob's bottle, and used it to mask his own lethal dose. He fled, fearing discovery. Jacob's voice broke the silence, trembling but clear. Mr. Holt? He came to the forge sometimes, delivering coal. Master Reddick argued with him weeks back about a debt. I didn't think... Poirot's smile was gentle, but triumphant. You did not think, Monsieur Wren, but you have helped forge the truth. Holt, the unseen hand, is our murderer. His cart, his cask, his motive, they complete the pattern. Barrow stepped forward, his voice firm. I'll send word to Wickham, sir. We'll find Holt. Poirot nodded. Do so, Constable, and Jacob, you will face justice for your act, but it is Holt who struck the fatal blow. Margaret Cole rose, her composure intact. A tragic affair, Monsieur Poirot. I trust my name is cleared? For now, Madame, Poirot said, his tone polite but cautious. The truth, it leaves no shadow. Varn grunted, turning to leave. Told you I was no killer. As the suspects dispersed, Hastings turned to Poirot, his face alight. You did it, Poirot, but how did you know it was Holt? Poirot's eyes twinkled. The little gray cells. Hastings. They saw the pattern. Jacob's fear, the cask's mystery, the note's urgency. Holt, a shadow in the village, knew Reddick's habits and Jacob's act. He seized the moment, and now he runs. But he will not escape. The forge stood silent, its secrets laid bare. Poirot's mind, however, burned bright, the final pieces forged into a truth as unyielding as iron. Chapter 11. The Village's Peace. The late afternoon sun bathed Ashby Hollow in a soft golden light, its rays filtering through the bare branches of the village's ancient oaks. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke and the promise of an early frost. The forge, once the heart of a grim mystery, stood silent at the edge of the square, its blackened stone walls no longer a barrier to the truth. Hercule Poirot, his overcoat pristine and his mustache impeccably groomed, walked slowly along the cobblestone path, his cane tapping a measured rhythm. Captain Hastings, at his side, carried his notebook, though its pages were now filled with the resolution of the case, his expression one of quiet satisfaction. Poirot, it's remarkable, Hastings said, his voice tinged with admiration. You unraveled it all. Jacob's confession, Holt's cunning, the poisoned cask. The village can breathe again, can't it? Poirot's green eyes flickered with a trace of melancholy, his lips curving into a faint smile. Oui, mon ami, the village breathes, but its breath carries the weight of tragedy. A young man's fear, a trader's greed, a blacksmith's death. These are wounds that heal slowly. Yet, the truth, it brings order, if not always peace. The square was quieter now, the villagers' whispers softened by the knowledge that justice was in motion. Constable Barrow had sent word to Wickham, and a search for Silas Holt was underway, with reports of his cart spotted near the county border. Jacob Wren, under Barrow's watch at the rusty anvil, awaited his fate, his confession a bitter-sweet step toward redemption. Margaret Cole and Elias Varn, cleared of murder, had returned to their lives, though their interactions with Poirot had left them wary of his piercing scrutiny. As they passed the church, its spire piercing the sky, Poirot paused, his gaze lingering on the forge. This place, he said softly. It was a crucible of human passions, fear, betrayal, vengeance. Jacob sought to silence his master, but Silas Holt he sought to destroy. The cask, it was his weapon, cloaked in Jacob's mistake. Hastings nodded, flipping through his notebook. It's still hard to believe. 2 poisoned deliveries in one night, Jacob's bottle to sicken, Holt's cask to kill. How did Holt know about Jacob's plan? Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his mind revisiting the puzzle's final threads. Holt, mon cher Hastings, was a man of the shadows. As a trader, he moved between villages, hearing whispers, observing routines. He knew of Reddick's debts, his arguments, perhaps even Jacob's fear. When he learned of the boy's bottle, perhaps through a careless word or a glimpse of Jacob's actions, he saw his chance. The cask, it was a bold stroke, masking his crime within another. They reached the rusty anvil, where the innkeeper, Mr. Tully, greeted them with a nod, his face reflecting the village's newfound calm. "You've done us a service, Mr. Poirot," he said, setting down a tray of tea. "Folks are talking, saying Holt's a coward, running like that. They're glad young Jacob's not the true killer." Poirot accepted a cup, his movements precise. "The village, it seeks simplicity, Monsieur Tully, but the truth, it is never simple. Jacob's act was born of desperation, Holt's of calculation. Both have blood on their hands, though Holt's stain is deeper." Hastings, sipping his tea, said, "It's a sad case, Poirot. Jacob's just a boy, caught in his own mistakes. And Reddick, well, he wasn't a saint, but he didn't deserve this." Poirot's eyes softened, though his voice remained firm. "Sadness, Hastings, is the shadow cast by human frailty. Reddick's harshness, Jacob's theft, Holt's greed, these are the sparks that lit this fire. Yet we have quenched it with the truth." Constable Barrow joined them, his face weary but resolute. "Word from Wickham, sir. They've tracked Holt's cart to a barn near the border. He's hiding, but not for long. We'll have him by morning." "Bon," Poirot said, his tone one of quiet triumph. "And Jacob, how does he fare?" Barrow sighed. "He's shaken, sir, but talking more now. Says Holt came to the forge a week before, arguing with Reddick about money owed for coal. Reddick laughed him off, said he'd pay when he was ready. Must have stung Holt bad." Poirot nodded, his fingers steepled. A debt unpaid, a pride wounded. For Holt, it was enough to kill. He used Jacob's bottle as a veil, knowing the boy's fear would obscure his own hand. Hastings closed his notebook, his voice thoughtful. "What'll happen to Jacob, Poirot? He didn't mean to kill, but he poisoned Reddick all the same." Poirot's gaze drifted to the fire, its flames dancing like the complexities of justice. "Jacob will face the law, Hastings, but his youth, his intent, these may temper his punishment. Holt, however, will answer for murder. The courts, they will decide, but the truth, it is ours." The parlor grew quiet, the fire's crackle mingling with the distant hum of the village. Poirot sipped his tea, his mind already turning to the next challenge, though his heart lingered on the forge's tragedy. "Ashby Hollow," he murmured. "It heals, but it will not forget. The forge, it is silent now, but its lesson echoes. Truth, like iron, must be forged with care." Tully, clearing the tray, paused. "Will you stay longer, sir? The village owes you a debt." Poirot's smile was faint but warm. "Non, Monsieur Tully, our work here is done. Tomorrow we return to London, where other mysteries await. But Ashby Hollow, it has taught us much." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the square, Poirot and Hastings stepped outside, the village settling into a fragile peace. The forge stood as a monument to the truth unveiled, its silence no longer a mystery, but a testament to Poirot's relentless pursuit. Chapter 12. The Journey Home. The morning mist draped Ashby Hollow in a delicate veil as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings boarded the carriage bound for London. The village, now stirring with the gentle rhythms of daily life, seemed to exhale a collective sigh of relief, its secrets laid bare by Poirot's unyielding scrutiny. The forge stood silent at the edge of the square, its blackened walls a mute testament to the tragedy resolved. Poirot, his overcoat immaculate and his hat tilted just so, settled into the carriage, his cane resting across his knees. Hastings, beside him, clutched his notebook, its pages a chronicle of their triumph, though his expression held a trace of wistfulness. "Well, Poirot, another case solved," Hastings said, his voice warm with admiration. "You've done it again, unraveled the tangle of Jacob's fear and Holt's cunning. The village owes you a great deal." Poirot's green eyes flickered, his mustache curving into a faint smile. "The village, mon ami, owes nothing but its honesty. The truth, it is my reward, forged in the crucible of the little gray cells. Yet, this case, it leaves a shadow. Youth misguided, greed unchecked, a life lost." The carriage jolted forward, its wheels creaking over the cobblestones as they left Ashby Hollow behind. The rolling hills of the Cotswolds unfolded beyond the window, their autumn hues softened by the mist. Poirot gazed out, his mind still tracing the threads of the mystery, though its knot was now undone. Hastings flipped through his notebook, his pencil tapping absently. "It's still a bit queer, isn't it? 2 poisoned deliveries, Jacob's bottle and Holt's cask. If Holt hadn't seized on Jacob's act, would Reddick have died at all?" Poirot's fingers traced the handle of his cane, his voice thoughtful. "A question of fate, Hastings. Jacob's dose, it was weak, meant to sicken, not to kill. Without Holt's cask, Reddick might have lived, chastened but alive. Yet Holt, he saw opportunity in Jacob's desperation, a chance to settle his own score, cloaked in another's guilt. It is the way of the cunning, to use the weaknesses of others." Hastings nodded, his brow furrowing. "And that note, settle the debt or it ends. You think Holt wrote it, don't you?" A warning Reddick ignored. "Oui," Poirot said, his eyes narrowing. The note, it was Holt's voice, though he meant it to be anonymous. The fragment with promise. It spoke of a bond broken, perhaps a deal struck between trader and blacksmith, soured by Reddick's refusal to pay. Holt, a man of the shadows, chose poison over confrontation, and the forge became his stage. The carriage rattled past a brook, its waters glinting in the morning light. Hastings leaned back, his voice softer now. "Poor Jacob. He's not a murderer, not really. Just a frightened boy, caught in a trap of his own making." Poirot's expression softened, though his tone remained firm. "Pity, Hastings, is a luxury we afford, but justice is not so kind. Jacob's act, though born of fear, set this tragedy in motion. He will face the law, but his youth, his remorse, they may temper the verdict. Holt, however, runs from a heavier guilt. The constables will find him, and the forge's silence will be his accuser." A message had arrived at the rusty anvil just before their departure, confirming that Silas Holt's cart had been found abandoned near the county border, its squeaking wheel a damning clue. Barrow's men were closing in, and Poirot had no doubt the trader's flight would end soon. The thought brought him no joy, only the satisfaction of order restored. Hastings closed his notebook, his eyes on the passing fields. "What do you think Reddick was like, Poirot? Everyone says he was hard, but he must have had some good in him to take on Jacob, to craft such fine work." Poirot's gaze grew distant, as if seeing the blacksmith's face in the mist. Thomas Reddick, he was a man of contradictions, skilled yet flawed, harsh yet loyal in his way. His forge was his kingdom, but kingdoms fall when trust is broken. His death, it is a lesson. No man stands alone, and no debt goes unpaid. The carriage crested a hill, and Ashby Hollow vanished from view, its stone cottages and silent forge swallowed by the landscape. Poirot leaned back, his hands folded, his mind already turning to the mysteries that awaited in London. "This village," he murmured, "it has taught us much. The forge, it is silent now, but its echoes, they speak of human frailty and the power of truth." Hastings smiled, a touch of his usual cheer returning. "You make it sound almost poetic, old chap, but you're right. It's a case we won't forget." Poirot's eyes twinkled, his voice light but resolute. "Poetry, Hastings, is the music of the mind, and the mind of Hercule Poirot. It sings of order, of justice. For now, we return home. But the world, it will call us again." The carriage rolled on, the Cotswolds fading into the distance, leaving behind a village forever changed by the truth forged in its silent heart.